Hi everybody, this is Rob Windsor. Normally now I'd be telling you that this video is a developer quick tip or a walkthrough showing you how to implement something in SharePoint or talking about a new technology. This video is going to be a little bit different. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can set up your SharePoint sites the same way I do for videos and conference talks, making it easy for you to duplicate any demos I did or run downloadable sample code. The first step in the process is to go to Central Administration or your SharePoint Online admin site and create a new site collection. I normally choose the developer site template, but you can choose the team site template if the demos you're trying to emulate don't involve the use of SharePoint apps. The next step is to use a utility application that I've written to create lists in the newly created site, and then populate those lists with data coming from the Northwind SQL Server sample database. To get the script to create the Northwind sample database, and to get the utility applications that I've written, you can navigate to bit.ly/Northwind SharePoint. Now, this last bit here is case sensitive, so you need to use a capital N, a capital S, and a capital P. When you navigate to this URL, you'll go to my OneDrive, and then here I have the script to create the Northwind sample database, the utility applications, one for working with an on-premises farm and one for working with SharePoint Online, and also the Camel you can use if you want to create a couple of the lists right within your Visual Studio project. You can download all these files as a single zip by clicking the download link up here. I've already done this. So in my downloads folder, there is the single zip. I've opened this up into this folder here. And here is the script to create the Northwind sample database. And then here are the 3 zip files containing the utilities. And I've opened each of these up into its own folder. So let's start with a scenario where I'm working with an on-premises farm. So coming back to Internet Explorer here, in this tab I have a freshly created site collection using the developer site template, and I want to populate the root site with the list and the data from the Northwind sample database. So the first step is to ensure that I have the Northwind sample database available to me. I do. Here, if I go to my SQL Server Management Studio, under Databases, there you can see Northwind. Now, if I didn't have Northwind, I could come back to the Downloads here, Shift right-click on this file, and choose Copy as Path. Come back to SQL Server Management Studio, click the Open File icon here, or choose File, Open File. Down here I could paste in the path to the file, but we can see we already have this folder open. So here I can just go click on Install Northwind SQL, click Open. And then once the script is loaded, just click Execute to create the Northwind database. Now, if you have newer versions of SQL Server, actually, it's not even really newer versions. I think it's about the last 3 versions. You'll probably have to delete these 3 lines of script. You'll get an error message when clicking Execute to tell you that these options are no longer supported if you do need to delete those 3 lines. Once you've successfully run the script, you should find Northwind here in Databases, and you should see we have a bunch of different tables, and those tables are populated with the sample data. With the database now available, we can run the utility. So if I come back to my SharePoint site, I'm going to right-click on the title here and choose Copy Shortcut. Then come back to my utilities, choose Load Northwind. This is the one for an on-premises farm. And I have the Visual Studio project if you want to see the code. But you can actually just go ahead and run the binary. So if we go into bin debug, there's the exe. I'm going to right click and choose run as administrator. I'm going to confirm that I have the correct connection string to my Northwind sample database. I'm going to paste in the URL to the SharePoint site that I want to prepare. And then I'm going to click the Create button. Down in the list box, you'll start to see status information coming up about what's going on with the utility application. And in generally about 2 or 3 minutes, this will indicate that the process is done, and you'll have your lists and the data inside of those lists in your SharePoint site. As we can see, the import is now complete. So I'll click Done here, and I'll close our utility application. I'll come back to my SharePoint site, and I'll refresh by clicking on the link here for the title. And here we can see the list that just got created. So we have a categories list, which has information about product categories. We have a products list, which has a lookup on categories. We have a customers list. We have an orders list. And we have an order details list. So that's SharePoint on-prem. What about SharePoint Online? Well, here I have a site in my SharePoint Online tenant. Whoops, it's not this one. It is this one I want to go to that has no lists already created. And again, I'm going to right-click on the title here and choose Copy Shortcut. Come back to my downloaded utilities. Go to Load Northwind SPO for SharePoint Online. Again, go to bin debug, and then right-click on the exe and choose Run as Administrator. Again, I'll confirm that my connection string to the Northwind sample database is correct. Here, I'll paste in the URL to the site, and then now I'll put in my credentials for SharePoint Online or Office 365. With the site URL set and my credentials typed in, I can now again click the Create button. And just like before, you'll see the status information shown in the list box below the Create button. Now, this application uses the client object model to talk to SharePoint Online remotely, so the program will take a little bit longer to run. But it's basically doing the same thing that the on-premises version of the utility did. As we can see, the application is now complete. So I'll click OK to close this dialog. And again, close the utility application. Come back to my SharePoint Online site. Click Demo to refresh the site. And then here we can see our lists. So there's the categories list, the products list, the customers list, the orders list, and the order details list. The last scenario uses more traditional SharePoint development techniques to add the list to a site, namely Camel and Features. Let's go back over to this tab, and let's go to a site in my local on-premises farm that doesn't have the list yet. I'm going to add the list, in this case, using a sandbox solution. So let's come back to Windows Explorer, and here's our Utilities folder. And I'm going to go into the folder called Load Northwind Lite. And here's the project for the sandbox solution. I'm going to go into bin debug, and there is the sandbox solution. So I'll copy this path to the clipboard, come back to my SharePoint site, go to the gear icon, and then Site Settings, and then Solutions. Click Upload Solution, browse, paste in the URL. Actually, I already had it here. and then choose my sandbox solution, load northwindlight.wsp, click open, and then click OK. And then finally, I'll activate the solution. And now all I need to do is activate the feature, which will create the lists. So I'll come back to the gear icon, go to Site Settings. I'm going to go to Manage Site Features. And here's the feature I need to activate, Add Northwind Demo Lists. I'll click Activate. And now you can see we have a categories list and we have a products list. So this sandbox solution doesn't create the 5 lists that the utility applications did, categories, products, customers, orders, and order details. It just creates 2 lists, products and categories. And to finish up, I want to mention a special case of the use of Camel and Features to create your lists. And that has to do with SharePoint hosted apps. So let me create a SharePoint hosted app just to illustrate this. I'll start up Visual Studio and choose New Project, App for SharePoint. And I'll choose my local, or a site in my local developer farm for testing. And I'll just go ahead and run the app by clicking the Start button here in the ribbon. So now that our app is running, I want to cover some terminology. This site here, where our page lives, where our JavaScript lives, where our CSS lives, that is called the app web. So you have a SharePoint site that stores the pages, JavaScript, CSS, and so on for the app. And then if I click this link here, I go up to what's called the host web. This is where in my SharePoint farm or my SharePoint tenant, I have installed the app. So this is the host web. I can click back on, or I can click on this link here to get back to the app web. The app web is a child site of the host web. So now let's think of the scenario where I want to create lists inside of the app web. Technically, I could use one of my utilities to create the list here, but that causes a problem. Because if I close this site down and come back to Visual Studio, anytime I retract a SharePoint hosted app, the current site, the current app web, gets deleted. So if I go to the Solution Explorer, right-click on the project and choose Retract, the app web gets deleted. If I change the app manifest and then click Start, the app gets retracted, meaning the app web gets deleted, and a new app web gets created. So in all of these scenarios, the list that I added using one of my utilities will get deleted. And that's obviously of no value. I want to always have the list there every time I'm running the app. So to solve that problem, we actually create the list as part of our SharePoint hosted app project. To do that, I'll come to my project, I'll right click and choose Add New Item. And then I'll choose List, and we'll create the categories list first. And in this dialog, the default settings are correct. I want to create a list called categories. I want it to be a customizable list based on the custom list template. So I'll click Finish. We don't need this designer, so I'll close it. And then over here in the Solution Explorer, we have this categories node. And inside of that, there's this categories instance node. So these two files here make up, or are part of the categories node. They make up the list definition. And then this element manifest here makes up the list instance. So the first thing we're going to do is modify the schema for the list definition. So we'll open that up. I'll just select everything and delete. and then come back over to my utilities, and then go up to Northwind Light, and there's a folder here called underscore categories. So I'll navigate into that, and then we're going to replace the schema file with this file here. So I'll just open up Notepad, open up that file in Notepad, copy everything to the clipboard, come back to my Visual Studio project, and then paste the schema into here. So the important parts here are the field refs. So our list is going to have 3 fields: title, category ID, and description. They're referenced also down here. And then finally, they're referenced down here where we have the, where is it? Right here, where we have the view. So that sets up the schema for our list. In the element manifest for the list definition, the only change we're going to make is here with the type. Custom list definition type should have a value above 10,000. So I'll set that to 10,001. And then in the element manifest for the instance, I'll set the template type to 10,001 to match the list definition. And then in here, I'm going to put the data for the categories list. So coming back to Windows Explorer, I'll again open up that notepad, or I'll grab that notepad, and I'll drag data.xml over here. Again, select everything, copy to the clipboard, come back over to my Visual Studio application, and then paste the data into here. So there's the data for our categories list. Oh, and I've made a mistake. Actually, this data needs to go inside of the list instance element. So let me correct that. Let me just grab all the data here and cut that, and then come inside of list instance and paste it into there. So that takes care of the categories list. Now we'll do the same thing for the products list. Right-click on the project, add new item, list. We're going to call this guy products. Click add. Choose the default values here, or leave the default values. Click finish. Close the designer. Come over to the products nodes. Open up Schema XML. Come back to utilities. Go into the underscore products folder. Get Notepad here. Drag and drop the schema over. Copy that to the clipboard. Delete the existing schema. Replace it with the new schema. And here you can see our fields: title, product ID, category, quantity per unit, and so on. Go to the element manifest. Change the list definition type to 10,002. And then go to the element manifest. Change its template type to 10,002. Come back to utilities. Get our notepad. Drag data.xml into there. Copy that to the clipboard. Come back to Visual Studio. And then paste the data elements into our list instance. So with those two things done, now every time we run our app, we should have the categories list and the products list. So let's go ahead and run. And then we'll get the URL to the app site, the app web, by right-clicking on the title and choosing Copy Shortcut. I'll open up a new tab here. I'll paste in the base URL for the site, and then add /lists/categories. And there you can see our categories list. And then I'll open up another tab. Again, paste in the URL to the site and say /lists/products. And there is our products list. So that ends the demo. These are all the techniques that I use in setting up my SharePoint sites for my demos. Using the two utility applications, one for sites of my on-premises farm and one for sites in my SharePoint Online tenant, and then using the sandbox solution or just the raw Camel for simpler scenarios. So now you should have everything you need to be able to set up your SharePoint sites to follow along with demos you see me doing in my videos and in my conference talks. Thanks very much for watching, and have a great day.